Hello, everyone. This is Sean Smith, and you are tuned in to the Country Fried Outdoors Chasing Your Experience podcast. The podcast that will connect you to resources regionally and nationwide to engage them and you in open, honest discussions so that we can inspire the growth that you need to chase the experience you want. So strap yourself in because here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Country Fried Outdoors Chasing Your Experience podcast. I'm Sean Smith, and on the other line, I have a very special guest. His name is Jake Mahar. Jake, say what's up.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for having me on, Sean.
Hey, no problem. So before we start diving into a whole lot of things, like you're from the West Coast, and I was talking with the co-host Sam the other night, and he's like, "Hey, you won't believe this, right? But Washington, the state of Washington, has an issue in the House, or I guess their version of the House. I'm from Ohio; we call it the House of Representatives. That is pushing for the right to hunt and fish in the state of Washington." And I sat there and I had to have him, I asked him, like, can you repeat that again? Like you said Washington state, right? Because of all the states in the union, Washington, given their political, climate, was the last one, or one of the last ones I thought would ever jump on this. Like, so what do you know? You live out close that way. What do you know about it?
Well, everybody down here is watching intently because as it tends to go on the West Coast, California will make a decision, and you can say you agree with it or you disagree with it, but generally the dumbest things that come out of California tend to go to Seattle and then tend to fall downhill into Portland. And when you've got a lot of that, coastal ideology that sort of filters around, we pay a lot of attention to what happens up in Washington. A little bit ago, they had the magazine capacity ban. And then that's starting to get pushed back because of, what the Supreme Court decided. And so as California's legislation starts to fall on the federal level, so is Washington's, and then Oregon's right behind it. And I don't want to say when Washington does something, Oregon follows suit, but pretty much you can account for, hey, if this is on the radar in Washington, come in here. So Oregon being, smaller state as far as population goes, but a very active hunting state, we watch what Washington does with a very, very sharp eye. And this constitutional push to enshrine the rights of hunting, fishing, and trapping it's a huge deal. I mean, it's a huge deal. I mean, that hunters in particular, they're not the most social creatures in the sense of collaboratively working together so that they can end up with the same end state, right? Everybody's got their spot, they got their honey hole, they got their secret places, and they don't want to share, they don't want to collaborate. And that's kind of been historical, not just across hunting, but even within the industry. And I think what's happening is that it's been, coming off of COVID and lockdowns and things where people then were, whether it's, some people would either credit or blame a guy like Joe Rogan for promoting hunting and self-sufficiency, depending on where you land on that. They came to a realization that for some that I actually want to be able to provide. Take that to the other end of the spectrum of that means I'm no longer dependent on a government entity. Okay, well, most groups that are in control of other groups want to maintain that dependency. So there is a big chunk of people down here that will say this is all just a control mechanism to eliminate hunting so that it's a gun grab. Maybe. Right? I mean, maybe I don't know what other people think inside their own heads, or maybe they think they're being altruistic by limiting or eliminating hunting, not able to hunt wolves, the predator hunts, the things that have gone on in Washington, Oregon, Colorado in particular. This last couple months, they're all very, very specific acts. What the motivation is behind that, it's conjecture at best, right? Because you got people on the hard right side of the fence that are going to say this is all, to take away our sovereignty. And then there's people on the far left that are saying this is to protect the animals. And I think that both sides fully believe they are correct. So when this popped up, and looking at, the actual grassroots movement, and I believe his name is Senator Wagner, who's a Republican senator in Washington, his team. This isn't like when the NRA swoops in and starts to push legislation like Measure 114 in Oregon. This is a senator representing his home district pushing this forward so that they can protect what should be, in their opinion, a constitutional right of Washington residents to continue to recreate if it's for recreational purposes, or supply and supplement their food if they don't have the capability to do so because of the economy through the means of hunting. So very much paying very close attention, because in one way or the other, however this rolls out, there will be an impact in Oregon, and it will either motivate people to come together or it will motivate people to spread apart. And for me, and folks like us, obviously talking to you on this podcast, I fully agree with, and I've heard this isn't for me, but, guys like Tom Opry and even Cam Hanes, professional bow hunter, not a professional archery competitive shooter, professional bow hunter. When you've got people on all ends of the spectrum talking conservation to enhance the capability of hunting and enhance the health of herds and keep things, because these are people on the ground with their boots saying this, and that the hunting community needs to come together and pay close attention to what's going on and really pay attention to who they're voting in. We've taken it for granted for so long. It's like, I don't think we're too far past to where we can't get it back, but it's pretty dangerous territory right now, being able to lose the right to be an outdoorsman or outdoorswoman and any kind of sportsman on that front, and let alone if you're hunting for sustenance, and then let alone what it would do to like the native tribes. If they pass that legislation, oh man, I mean, you've got people that is their food. I mean, we eat elk year round as our primary source because we hunt. Doesn't mean we couldn't afford to go buy, cow at the grocery store, but we'd prefer to fill our own freezers. But there are other people that don't have that choice of preference. It's, I have to go shoot a deer, I have to go shoot an elk, or we don't eat. And it's a big, that's a whole other level of stress. And so I don't want to say I'm excited to see where this goes, because if it, that wouldn't be necessarily appropriate, but I'm very interested to see how this plays out and where the debate takes it, because for like in places right now, like in Colorado, it's not going in a good direction, and Washington's kind of tipping the wrong way too. In Oregon, dominoes start to fall, and you might not necessarily want to be one of them, but you might not have a choice just because that's how it seems to go.
Yeah. So you brought up a couple of points I never really thought about in this right to hunt, because Ohio, we've started discussions of that in October of last year, of the right to hunt movement. And I never really thought about the indigenous people aspect, because we have, the eastern part, we have indigenous people in the area, but we don't have the big like reservations and stuff that you find in the western states.
Right.
So it's one of those things that I'm not, and I might sound terrible for saying this, but it was never a thought. I'm like, that is that is a great point though. And so I want to touch on a couple of things, or at least circle back a couple of things you said, because I've heard this argument before. And the one argument was that, how people complain about big pharma this, big pharma that. Well, let's insert big food. We'll put big food into this.
Yep,
and,
for sure.
And big food doesn't want us to be able to sustain ourselves, right?
No,
because they want us to be reliant on them. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. And from the last, I don't know, since 2020, after surviving that year and what's been going on recently, maybe that's not too far fetched. But, at the same time, thinking about that, like, with 338 million people that live roughly in the United States of America, we kind of need that. I hate to say it, not necessarily big food, but we kind of need that supplement to actually support that, that nation. You know what I mean? For everyone, because it's unfortunate. Trust me, I like for everyone to be able to pick up a bow, a gun, and go out and hunt for their own food. I don't know if that natural resource could sustain that.
Well, and that's the thing that's kind of ironic too, because you've got, and just so because nobody on here has any idea. When I say left, I'm not talking the normal like left of center. Right. Or the right of center.
Right.
I'm more addressing the 5% of the people on the left that make 95% of the noise and seem to garner the most attention. But the reality is, they're probably, just because they're the loudest in the room doesn't mean they're the most dominant number, right? So
Right.
when I say hard left, that's kind of what I'm referring to, and hard right, because there's idiots everywhere. But when you look at the actual numbers and you look at the comparisons for, well, if and this is the argument from the hard left, if we enshrine the right to hunt to where it's a state constitutional right, it's going to decimate herds. It's going to cripple. We're going to be back to where the buffalo were wiped out. And all this, you know, some people like my mom would call it poppycock. I call it horse shit. Oh. And the reality is, when your hunting success rate in the state of Washington we'll just take elk, is less than 10%. So for every 1,000 people that are going out there, mm-hmm. you've got less than 100 that are coming home with something in their fridge, right? Mm-hmm. And the elk population, the cow population, it's like we're not even touching those total numbers. I'm putting aside the wolf and the cougar component of this for a second. Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Oregon, Washington, California. I mean, there's nothing in California hardly anymore to hunt, but the numbers it just doesn't play out that way.
Right.
You've got as many people that want to go out and hunt right now as they choose to. Mm-hmm. The conversion rate is so impossibly low. Certain states like Wyoming have and Montana too, have better success rates, but it's because they have so much fewer people mm-hmm. compared to land mass and animal opportunity. So you've got a culture of people. I mean, Wyoming doesn't even have 1 million people in the state. And the vast majority of the people that are in the state as residents are what you'd call recreational day hunters. Otherwise, like, they're not professional guides, right? They're right. Recreational hunters. So they have a pretty high conversion rate, all species included. But the reality is they're not taking that many animals, and nowhere near the totals that are present in the actual ecosystem.
Right.
So just go to the math. Just because you enshrine this as it's still really, really hard to hunt and come home with an animal. And it's for me, especially with this topic, I find it ironic because you've got a bunch of people that are saying no to this, that want to push hunting away. And I'm not even going to go down the rabbit hole of saying it's a gun grab or any kind of thing like that, because I don't really necessarily believe that. I think you've got a bunch of people who have no fucking clue what they're talking about.
Right.
That are trying to, in their own little echo chamber, trying to set policy on something because they think that if we protect the elk and we protect the deer, they're going to live this long, magical life and, take the rainbow road to happy land at the end of their life. No, what's going to happen is they're going to get sick. We have degradation tags here in mm-hmm. Oregon for elk because there's too many, and they'll end up starving to death in the winter because there's too many, the herd management, right? So then the flip side is, okay, so now you who want to protect these animals, they're going to die a miserable death. No animal dies in the wild happily.
No.
They get killed. They either fall, they die. Watch the Nature is Metal on Instagram and just wait for it. Nature is brutal,
right?
Absolutely brutal. And so I think there are some people that they and I love animals. Every single time I've been successful hunting. I mean, and my best friend Paul and I both, we kind of laugh at each other because I'm sad. I feel bad. Like I cry. Right? It's mm-hmm. like you get that little tear in your eye. It's like, oh man, it's a tough thing to take a life, but at the same time, I'm hungry. And right. It's not an ego trip. You'll never, at any time in my life, would you have ever seen or will see me with one of the, and I got no problem with people to do, but I'm not doing the selfie shot with the animal, right?
Right.
If I killed a bear with my bare hand, I'd probably do that selfie, but I got a weapon. Right. I have an advantage. I have a tactical right. advantage. I'm taking that advantage. I'm using that advantage to put food in my freezer so that we can eat.
Right.
And bringing my daughter up the same way. But for me, it's emotional. I mean, it's not something I enjoy doing, but at the same time, I understand the presence and the purpose that I have. And, it's being an adult. It's being a father. It's I mean, you take it all the way back to hunter provider, but reality is we eat because we put stuff in the freezer. You can offload that, and Andy Stump has a great way. He's like, you can outsource your murder if you want to buy cow at the restaurant or the grocery store, but no food is consumed by a human that doesn't involve the death of something. So either you outsource it or you do it yourself.
100.
And for us, for us that's how I look at it. But the irony is, it's an incredibly hard thing to do with an incredibly low success rate, especially if you're one of the psychos like us that like to do it with a bow. Like, hey, let me just make the really, really hard thing harder.
Right.
And, it's super, super, super challenging. And people that just don't have a clue what they're talking about, to then go out and espouse that they're going to, the conservation efforts are we can't enshrine this because we're just going to wipe out the population. That's just not true.
Right.
Hunters want a plethora of healthy herds because it gives them the best opportunity of something that is such a low success rate. You need as many positive chances as you can get because it's so statistically hard to do.
Right. And I agree 100%. Like it is, like you're right. There is like most areas, especially with elk, like there's a few others that pop up there with those low statistical, success rates, like, but 10%, take that even more.
Yeah.
Like there's only 10% of hunters that go out, let's say there's, like you said, of 1,000 hunters, only X amount of elk are going to be shot by that 1,000 hunter, by that group, right? So there's the majority of them, 900 of them is not going to get not going to shoot an elk. Here's the problem,
right.
though. The 10% that is successful, like that 10% success rate is usually done by only the same, like 10% of hunters. Like they account for the majority of those harvests because they've figured it out. They put the hard work in to get there. And you're right. It is hard work. Like, and honestly, I don't think there's a lot of people that's up for that hard work. And
no.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, I was gonna say absolutely not. Go look at the level of fitness in our society. We're not a fit society by the numbers. We're a fat society. We're a fat, lazy society by the numbers. The vast majority of people are not going to put in the work to go and harvest an animal. And that's not just going to magically change just because you protect it with a constitutional, amendment in the state of Washington.
No,
lazy people are still going to be lazy. They're not going to get off their ass. I mean, it's not like this is going to open some floodgate of opportunity. The same people are going to be doing the same thing.
Right.
And just in the last, say 4 years, we've got 5 between our, group and family, 5 elk in the last 4 years. I mean, some people hunt 30 years and never, have a shot. And, but the work you put in results in the work you get out. If you are fit, if you are capable, if you practice, if you train, you're going to have an opportunity if you put the time in.
Right.
And whether you convert on that opportunity depends, but it's not like this is all of a sudden going to turn into like a touring bus of rifles or bows sticking out windows of a charter bus and just, again, the buffalo analogy. That's just not the reality. That's not how it is. It's too hard of a thing to do to have that be the case.
And in the buffalo analogy, really that came down to commercial hunting.
Commercial hunting and just radical poaching too. And there's a whole other conversation there about eliminating the buffalo herd because that absolutely crippled the food source for the Native Americans, to which we then came in and mowed over them with our, with the military. So,
I think
and that's a whole other conversation, but it is, you take away the food source and trade, and you have a people that are less resistant to being taken over.
Yeah, I think I went too broad of a brush when I made that statement, but and so on this flip side of that, there's the left is like, oh, you're going to decimate herds because it's not a free for all. First and foremost, none of these constitutional amendments are going to allow for just the indiscriminate killing of whatever animal you want to kill. Like it's not going to allow for that. There's still going to be laws in place that that are going to protect them because number one, hunters are probably one of the greatest hunters, fishers, people who are outdoors enthusiasts are probably one of the greatest conservationists that you're ever going to meet, more so than the Monday morning quarterbacks or the people armchair quarterbacks who think they're conservationists, like all the park goers, the hikers and things like that, they don't really contribute anything to the conservation effort except for a mouthpiece. That's about it. They don't pay for maybe some of their funds that they pay when they pay for outdoor gear goes towards it, right? But in reality, there's a whole law that says anything that's sold that's like hunting related, outdoor, especially archery related, has to go into a special fund just for conservation. Right. And so hunting licenses, most of the stuff that we pay for to the state all gets cycled back into the conservation efforts. Rather we agree with what the commission or who your Park and Wildlife or your Department of Natural Resources, their decisions are at that time, but you're funding their efforts. But let's also look at that on the same side as the right side, though, or what I guess you could say the right be like, yeah, that means they can't tell us that we can't shoot wolves, or Colorado is a hot button topic right now because of the introduction of wolves. That's a perfect example of ballot box conservation, and nobody really understanding the true ramifications of what happens when you do such a thing. First and foremost, I mean, shame on you for being that ignorant to not know that wolves already exist in Colorado. And also, shame on you for bringing in these predators into an ecosystem where they really don't have any real competition. There's
no competition, and the prey have no defense.
No, they've not.
That's the other thing too. It's
yeah,
like you've had, especially when you transplant a wolf, and I'll load mountain lions into that category too.
Right.
I know in Ohio and Midwest, you guys don't have murder cats running around chasing you while you're chasing prey animals, but there's wolves don't eat dead things. Mountain lions, more 90+% of the time, don't eat dead things. Bears, there's a if you've ever had bear versus mountain lion, there's a different taste in the meat. Bears are omnivores, obviously. They'll eat fruit, they'll eat berries, but they also eat flesh. But bears will eat, they'll scavenge, right? Like a coyote. I mean, that's why most people don't eat coyote, because it tastes like shit. Mountain lion tastes amazing because it only eats fresh, live animals. Wolves, I've heard, taste the same because they only eat fresh, live animals. It is not an accident that you've got these animals that are predators that will only eat fresh, live prey when they have the option to. Why would they go back to some kill that they had to, stick and leave aside when they can just go get brand new fresh?
Right.
And so you've got these prey animals that now have no natural defense because they haven't had generations of input to understand how do I avoid these animals that hunt in a pack. And it's not just like, oh, we took down one and we're going to chill for a week. It's like, nope, we're going to take down 17 in a day. Yeah. And it's like, it decimates the health of the herds. And they're not going after, the big, they'll go after the big old slow bulls or the bucks, and things like that. But generally what it is, it's your fawns, it's your calves. It's the, the ones that make a bad decision, right? Because they don't know any different or aren't physically capable of avoiding. You can see those videos on YouTube everywhere. People glassing a hillside watching a herd of deer or herd of elk, and you'll see the wolves moving in the pack, and it's just like, man, that's a murder machine, and they will not stop just because I'm full right now. Like, nope, there's another. They wake up to kill, they go to bed ready to kill the next day. It's just the way that it is, and to artificially reintroduce those into areas that just haven't, the prey animals haven't had that genetic imprint,
right,
to know how to deal with that. It's going to be decimating, absolutely decimating.
Well, let me look at Idaho, or at least northern Idaho.
Yeah.
Idaho.
Yep.
I mean, it's not hard to find an example of what you're trying to do somewhere in the state or somewhere in the United States. Like, someone's tried it. We're pretty good at trying things, and someone's tried it, but what we have a problem with is learning from those mistakes or learning from those things. Right now they're trying Idaho. Heck, you can turn your elk tag into a wolf tag in Idaho because that's how
with a bounty.
with a bounty. That's how, number one, prolific the wolf problem has become, right? And it started pretty much similar how Colorado's going to start. But I don't think people realize that, number one, wolves aren't really stupid. They're not easy to hunt.
They are terrifyingly smart. So are cats.
So, like, they're not easy animals to hunt, and that makes them, I don't want to say impossible to manage, but it makes them extremely hard to manage if you don't allow for the right tools to be put in place. And in the far right, and or right leaning, we're like, well, that will stop them from doing these types of things. And once again, I'm gonna go back to the same argument that I just made for the left. It doesn't mean that it's just a free for all, right? There's going to be, there'll be rules and regulations will be put in place. It might help you in an argument later down the road to allow for the intelligent regulation of the wolves, right? Have some type of conservation plan put in place for the wolves. Because right now, unless I'm missing something, there is no plan in place for the wolves. It's just put them there and good luck. Like there's no idea of like what is going to be the holding capacity of the wolves. You know, how many wolves can this area hold? There's nothing. There's no plan in place, and just to let them to go forth and do what wolves do, which is scary. So I think either side, you know, so we can really trace back, and I don't want to go too far in history, but this whole like constitutional idea of hunting. Now, it wasn't really necessarily like constitutionally wise, but if you think about it, go back to 1776, right? Every American person, colonist, whatever, they had the right to go out and shoot and kill animals. And they for their survival, for food, right? For sustenance. They just left a country, England, where you had to be really well connected in the royal family, you know, or it's some type of noble to be able to hunt.
The king's deer.
Yeah, because they belong to the king. And, you know, when you come to America, like it's always been our model that you can just, you know, it's part of our heritage. It's just part of who we are. Like, you know, and you know, that also allowed for the decimation of some, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, the decimation of some of the populaces of animals. And there's a few organizations that started to appear. And this is where kind of Boone and Crockett kind of started to show up, if my history is correct. And they started to say, hey, these are some of the tenets that we would like to implement. And I think it's really going to have a great impact on the herd, especially like deer and all these game animals. And that's where the kind of the idea of like, you know, so Boone and Crockett, do you know a little bit of why they came up with the scoring system they did, or why it has to be so many inches before they allow it into their books?
Yeah, the general history of it, it's pretty well established. And it's funny because, you know, what that has turned into now on the I guess you could say on the attack side is that, oh, hunters are only hunting for scores. There are people that trophy, and I'm going to just air quote trophy hunt, right? There are people that will only trophy hunt. And that's their main prerogative. Just like there are people that will poach. Just like there are people that will go out and use illegal calls or baiting mechanisms to bring in animals that isn't, you know, what I would consider ethical, let alone legal.
Right.
A lot of times it isn't, but even just ethical. Like every other part of life, there are shitty people that'll do shitty things. But that 5% or 1% or whatever number that is, that overwhelming minority does not represent the other 90+% that are out there, just like our law enforcement officers that are doing the right thing every single day that nobody ever hears about because it's not interesting, because it's not negative.
Right.
They only want to talk about the negative, the hyper negative, the X number of animals were killed in this capacity. We have to stop it. Like, you're talking about outliers, statistical outliers of people that, you know, you're never going to have all good, just like you're hopefully never going to have all bad. But with especially the Boone and Crockett scoring and things like that. And I really actually appreciate, you know, John Dudley, he spoke at the convention this year, and I watched it because obviously can't afford to go. But talking about that, it's like, you know, the purpose of this organization for people that are external listening in is not, it's not about scoring, right? It's not about who's got the biggest rack. There are people that measure that. There's people that measure a lot of things. There's guys that put lift kits on their pickup trucks, right? I mean, it's like, we like to measure stuff. But you know, he dove deep into the purpose of that and what it actually, you know, the organization means. And I really actually encourage people to go find that. It's easy to find. He's got it linked on his YouTube and everything, but it's a great, and Steve Rinella is another guy too, that does a really good job explaining the reality. Like, hey, this is not ego driven, you know, and I mean, we can go down a whole tangent of the African guided hunts and all that kind of stuff too, but it's not the overwhelming majority of hunters, especially the kinds that, you know, I am around. They're like I am. And not that I'm only looking for people like me, but more in the sense of like, even Cam Hanes. I mean, he's the most famous Oregonian hunter. He's one of the most famous hunters, you know, next to Fred Bear, right? I mean, as far as the bow goes, he exemplifies that. He is out there putting the miles in, grinding all the time, because he's not a competitive archer. He's a bow hunter.
Yes.
And that's what he does. And I mean, he's even said it, you know, we run into him at bow rack, you know, here and there. And, he's the same guy he's been forever. He's never changed. You know, people that are just now getting to know him because of, you know, social circumstances where things like, you know, going on Joe Rogan tends to do that for you. But he's been the same guy for 40 years. And to think that everybody looking external would look at him as some kind of trophy hunter that does, it's like, man, that guy feeds more families than I would argue most people ever even donate food to organizations could even touch. I mean, he does so much for so many people, let alone the skill set and empowerment side to make them better hunters and, self-sustaining. But yeah, he hunts 6 states and pulls a bull out of every state every year if he can, and people eat. And I mean, nobody would complain if if he was flying around going to ranches and knocking off cows like moo cows and coming back with beef. Nobody would say a word, because that's exactly how you get your beef in your grocery store. But because it's an elk and he's doing it himself, that suddenly makes it no. It's just it's a lot of nonsense from people that don't know what they're talking about and start believing their own echo. But the flip side is, without anybody else standing up to have a voice and push back against it, like the legislation moving hopefully forward in Washington, you're just going to get run over. You could fight the good fight and keep your mouth shut, but you're just going to get smashed. So yeah, for us here, it's like I really do hope that it's a wake up call, for the younger crowd that are active, capable voters. Pay attention and vote and vote proper, because otherwise you're going to run into like what you have in Colorado right now, which is just it's a hot mess.
Yes.
And like everything, it swings one way, it'll swing back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'll swing back. You'll find out. I mean, if you introduce wolves and grizzly bears and everything, and these various different predator species that they want to transplant, that's all well and good, as long as if it's killing a deer, if it's killing an elk or whatever, that's fine. But yeah, when it starts now, when you have legislation that reintroduces predators, as long as they're taking out prey animals like deer and elk and whatnot, that's all fine, because it fits the narrative. But they start knocking off hikers. I wonder how liberal they're going to be with their decision making on keeping those animals in those locations, when all the places that you want to go recreate, you're now having to play defense against a cat that literally wants to murder you every time you walk down the trail. So it'll swing back. You just got to make sure, or we just got to make sure, the voting public, that we don't let it swing too far to one side to where it collapses and cripples itself permanently.
Yeah, that's the fear, is that it goes too far, and it's either going to be a very long road to recovery, or it will never be a recovery. It'll be too far gone. And you made a good point. Like, yeah, right now it's all fun and games until someone gets hurt, and then all of a sudden now it's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I'm with you. I'm watching Washington now to see on how that goes for them. And I hope that they make it, because they'll make, I think, the 23rd state in the union. If they do pass it, that will be a right to hunt state. Because I think there's 22 right now. Vermont, believe it or not, it's been the first ever. And I think that they've been like that since their creation. It's been a right to hunt, if I remember correctly. But they were the first, and now hopefully Washington will be the most recent one to join that list. And hopefully there's a lot more that follow suit with them.
I agree.
Totally. Because it's our heritage, and I don't want to necessarily say heritage like that, but like our pursuit, our passions, they are kind of on the eye of certain individuals that don't agree with what we do. There are some who think that we shouldn't kill animals, period, regardless if it's commercial farming or that type.
Totally.
They're against killing animals, and there are some that are against killing animals themselves. Like, they much rather, well, you can just go to the store and eat the meat that was bludgeoned to death by somebody else. Because you made that point already. Like, if you're eating meat and real meat, someone else had to kill that. Like, that was an animal that was alive and breathing at some point in time. And
yeah, if you're a vegetarian, you're eating vegetables that were farmed from a ground that was tilled that killed animals. Oh. There is no amount of consumption that a person can make, short of maybe plankton, that isn't going to result in the death of some animal. It's not possible. It's just not possible.
Ted Nugent has a great rant about that. And it shows up, and there's like an Australian sheep herder who gets into an argument, or it not argument, but debate, and basically makes the same argument about, the commercial farming of like vegetables to support a vegan diet. Like, if everyone went vegan, like, you don't understand. Yeah. Like, you basically have to go in there and torch the ground. You go and you torch it, you plow it, and you kill, and you're killing every vole, every snake, every small animal and even large animal that's not fast enough or smart enough to get out of the way of the combines. Because you'll see some pictures here in Ohio every now and again, or just around the country in farm countries where deer have some nasty gashes on their backs, and more likely that was from a combine going through and collecting corn. They just didn't get out of the way in time. And I can't tell you how many fawns get decimated because of farming operations. Farmers will go out to cut hay, they'll go out to do whatever they're doing, and a fawn is laying there doing what a fawn's supposed to do and just hold still and gets decapitated or worse. So, and I've been saying it for a while, and I'm like, I wish people were a little bit more involved in where their food comes from, because I think that they would have a better appreciation of what it is. And maybe
100%.
maybe not be so wasteful. And I got to be honest with you, and I'm might be telling on myself here. I can go hunt animals, right? And it doesn't. I'm with you. Like it's a happy moment, but yet it's also like a remorseful moment because you've taken this life, right? This beautiful creature, you've taken its life, and there is a little bit of a tear that's shed. I don't know if I could raise a cow and slaughter it.
I've had that conversation with my daughter, and that's a different thing, right? It'd be like, the litmus test I always have is like, okay, we're stranded on a desert island or whatever, make up the scenario, and I've got my dogs with me, and either I have to kill my dogs to survive, or I die. I ain't killing my dogs. Like, there's just no way.
Right.
And, so for the people that are capable of doing that with regards to, raising cattle and things like that, I understand there's a little bit of a disassociation that you have to keep there, and you have to, don't name the cow kind of deal.
Right.
But there's a reason for that. It's because we're people, and we have this innate connection to animals. We want that. What we want, though, is projecting into what we think we see with them, with the relationship back and forth. Mm-hmm. Dogs notwithstanding, because dogs are literally, humans' best friend. And there's that unique relationship with dogs. But any other animal, like it isn't Disney movies with the animal kingdom. It's violent, and they don't like you. Even moo cows on the farm, they don't like you. You feed them. That's it. Right. They don't care about you. They don't care about your emotions. They don't care about anything. They just want to eat grass or whatever and go about their day. Horses definitely have a little more emoting and tighter connection, a little bit higher order. But I mean, the reality is most animals, they don't really care about humans. They just want to avoid them, and they don't want anything to do with them. And so this idealized concept that we're somehow, we are responsible because we're the highest order thinking species on the planet. We have a responsibility for it. If we were, plankton or krill, well, okay, we just be plankton and krill. But we're people, and we have to identify that. We have to respect it. The flip side of that for me is I don't particularly, yes, if somebody doesn't want to take care of their own meat, they don't want to, do their own killing, totally fine with that. They want to be vegetarian because of ethical reasons, totally fine with that. But it's kind of like the people that want to save the environment while driving their Teslas. It's like, hey, just make sure you're reminding yourself that the cobalt that's mined and the damage that does to the environment while you're saving the environment with your Tesla, that's also occurring simultaneously. So yes. I'm cool if you want to save the environment. I'm cool if you want to save animals or try and preserve as much, natural resource for animals to thrive in as possible. But I'm not cool when it starts to turn into an ideological concept of, oh, you're better than me because you don't kill an animal, and I am less of a person, to which you now want to legislate my ability to do that because I choose to go do that and fill my own freezer. Again, no problem with what you believe, just don't force others into it. Short of other things like you and I have talked about before. It's like, if you're trying to tell me that you're a pedophile and I'm going to be cool with that, no, I'm going to skin you alive with a potato peeler. But right. on this topic, for sure, got no problem. We're on opposite sides of the fence with regards to hunting. That's totally cool. But you do you, and I'll do me, and we'll be friends.
Yeah, I mean, that just comes down to being just good people and just respect for one another. Like, we're not going to be, and we're honestly, we don't want to be a hive mind. Like, just then respect for each other. As long as we, keep it legal, keep it ethical, keep it moral. Like, then let live. You know what I mean? But
absolutely.
But anyways, this is a conversation that you and I could probably have for a very long time. I will end it like this: like most of these people see these bears, these wolves, and these cats as these cuddly little animals that they've seen on a Disney movie, right? And like, oh, they would never do anything. You watch it all the time in these national parks where people walk up to these wild animals and they get way too close, and either this, and if it is a predatory animal and it attacks them, what's the next thing that happens? The rangers or somebody has to go out, find this animal and kill it because it was being an animal.
Yep.
You know, and it's not,
or relocated or whatever, and it's like,
yeah,
because the people interfered.
And honestly, I don't think they can get away with relocation these days, because if that happens again, they're liable for it. I mean, yeah. I could be wrong. I mean, but it's never mind. It's like, I have no empathy for people who get attacked by animals because they put themselves in a bad spot and didn't realize that an animal was going to do what an animal does. Now, I have empathy because they've probably been misguided by a pop culture that doesn't know what they're talking about, or also maybe have a little empathy because they didn't have the right influencers around them to at least instill a bit of respect into them. Because I don't know if you've ever seen a bear kill anything. It is not pretty. It is not, there's nothing beautiful. There's nothing pretty about it. Like, it is a very savage, very primal moment. And in all intents and purposes, that bear has already started to eat that animal before it's dead.
Yep. So, and that's, like I said, it's the account that I can't like really watch that often, but there's an account on Instagram called Nature is Metal, and it's raw. I mean, it's everything that we've just been talking about. And if people are listening to this and they want to go like really see what nature looks like, fair warning. I mean, I can rarely check in on that page just because I have a hard time watching it.
Yeah, I do too.
But it's real. So I'm not ignoring that it's out there. I just don't want to watch it.
Right. No, I don't either.
Because I and that part of that makes me feel better when I have to, and it is a little bit of self-justification, but when we put an animal down, I know that they took one step, or like, my elk last year, she right where she was. My daughter's out this year, maybe 4 steps, and that is the fastest, most ethical way that animal, which was going to die at some point.
Right.
There is no question in my mind that what we were able to do was going to be a much, much, much more peaceful, fast, in some cases, if you're, proficient, instantaneous death than anything that nature would provide for them.
100.
Anything nature's going to provide is going to be violent and terrible and awful and horrible. And a small part of me feels a little bit better about being able to provide. But that's also, even whether it's a rifle shot or a archery shot, I shoot my rifle like I shoot my bow. It's the same shot placement. It's the same timing. It's the same weight. It's everything. I won't put it down there unless if it's with a bullet or a bow, it's going to be the same location. I want double heart, or double lung and heart. I want it. I'm going to do everything I can to set that up.
Absolutely.
Because that's going to be instantaneous, and as hopefully pain-free completely, or as painless as possible for the shortest amount of time possible.
100%.
Other people don't hunt that way. Other people, if they see brown, it's going down, kind of thing, right? They'll put a round in and then they'll move up and whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But for me,
you apparently have not been on an eastern. You've never been on an eastern United States deer drive yet, then.
No, and I've heard there's some stuff like I've never Colorado. I've hunted in Nebraska, upland game in Nebraska and stuff. The kind of some of the Midwest and east side, and I've got some friends out there, especially through the Badge of the Bow stuff too, that just the techniques and the methodologies are different. I don't think I would participate in that because it's not my style.
Right.
I much prefer to not have anyone around me, sort of who I'm with, and partly safety too, but then also there is something just different about you're spending 6 hours on a stalk and you get a chance, and it's you versus the herd, or you versus one, or whatever it is. It's just a different thing. And it works better for me than the other methods. Not to say the other methods are bad. I know that like some of the deer drives with the muzzleloader guys, like just the way that they run those, different. just not for me, not my style,
Right.
not what I would want. If I could choose, that's not what I would choose to do. Doesn't make it wrong. It's just not what I want to do. I like putting the work in. I like having, end of the day, it's like I did 16.8 miles a day, 12,000 vertical feet up and down. And now it's 1 a.m. and I'm cutting quarters off of an elk.
Well, I can't agree with you more when you say like, "Hey, listen, it's not what I want to do, but if you're into it and you're happy with it, then be my guest," right? Because it's kind of the goal behind this podcast is to embolden people to kind of chase the experience that they want and not feel ashamed because of it. As long as it's legal and moral, and we don't have to no poaching or you didn't do anything that you weren't supposed to do. It happens. But,
Exactly.
we want people to go out and enjoy the outdoors because like you kind of mentioned earlier already, and we're going to start diving into who you are here in the next couple questions. But like you said earlier, like we spend too much time like kind of dividing ourselves, and I'm not saying, I don't want to make it sound like and raise the flag that we need to band together against the evil anti-hunters. Like I get that we need to have some type of a voice, but at the same time, like we need to be able to celebrate our differences, and like, hey, if they want to go do that, that's fine. Just because, it's like trad bow shooters, compound shooters, crossbow shooters, right? I don't shoot trad and I don't shoot crossbow. It's not because I don't want to. It's like, well, it's part of it I don't want to. Just because you do it doesn't make you wrong, right? And then
right, exactly.
Like I love compound. There's something magical about the compound bow. I love it. Like, I've gun hunted. That's how I started hunting, and I've been on those deer drives, right? And like you said, like there's eventually as you kind of grow as a hunter, at least in my track of life, as I've grown as a hunter, like I appreciate just the chess game that it is with the bow, because deer, I'm predominantly a deer hunter in Ohio. That's what we hunt. It's you and the deer are actually still doing what deer does. Like gun season in Ohio, they're running because that a very effective technique in Ohio is a deer drive, because you send a line of people through the woods through a snag or whatever, and they walk through and they push deer towards the standers, and so they're constantly on the move, and pretty much they're not doing what deer typically do, and that's that's kind of a little bit behind me, but anyways, obviously you are a very, very passionate outdoorsman, passionate hunter. But let's dive a little bit more deeper into Jake Mehar. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what your background is, and I know you love to talk about yourself so much, but what I know so far, you are more interesting than what you gave yourself credit for. So let's hear a little bit about Jake.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but no, I mean, I guess the easiest way to be how you and I got connected actually online through the Badge and the Bow stuff was my previous life. The trajectory that I was on was in law enforcement. I had a very truncated career or experience. I can't really call it a career because I don't know what that, it's like how many cows make a herd, the two or more. How many years make a career, right?
Right.
But I was former law enforcement and loved every second of it. And what they don't tell you a lot of times is that if you have to rely on your body for your job, it might not always go your way. And the average career span for law enforcement officers now, I think, is actually under 6 years, and it's either burnout or injury. And I managed to keep myself put together. I blew my knee out when I was literally after high school. ACL, MCL, PCL, folded it sideways. A whole lot of stuff after that, surgery wise, and lots of surgeries, bad surgeon, a bunch of stuff. But I kept myself more or less in the game on the going down the path of law enforcement side. And finally got a shot with the department and academy, and went through all that. And I worked as much as I could and loved every second of it. And then it was over. And I'm, at least as far as most of the doctors and guys I know, one of the youngest ever recipients of a total knee replacement. So I have an artificial knee, walking around on that, a few herniated discs in the back, kind of the normal, active, high mileage athlete body, but it doesn't work well when you need to use your body for your job. And that was the end of my opportunity to wear a badge and be in a patrol car was not what I was expecting it to be. And we talked about this a little bit beforehand too. If you're a team sport person, and I don't mean like track team, like where you're running your own race. I mean like football, basketball, lacrosse, hockey. If you're a team sport person, there is no job in the world other than law enforcement, fire, or military that is going to scratch that itch and find that community. And when you can't do it and you have to get out into the private sector and it's not, you're not wired for that, it's pretty tough. And it, you know, the, everything that I wanted law enforcement experience to be, it was. I mean, people, you know, I wasn't in long enough to really get any kind of bitterness towards it by any means. So everything is still, you know, a little bit of rose-colored lenses. I mean, there's some shitty stuff,
Right.
And we talked about that, you know, a little bit too. I mean, I don't know that I could have done a whole career. We talked about, you know, some people make it 20, 30 years and, you know, what they're exposed to and they wear it okay. And then some people don't. Right. And it's not necessarily like the 1 pound rock that gets you, it's that last 1 pound rock, but where and what are those influencers? And, you know, for me, you know, I've come around to looking at it like maybe I was spared from some things because when I started down the path, you know, I didn't have a kid and then magically had a kid. Not magic, there's actual, you know, physiology behind that, which I don't think anybody needs an explanation of, but my wife and I had our daughter and you know, run around chasing bad guys, adults doing things to other adults. Nothing ever bothered me. None of it. You know, I was interested in what would happen. I wanted to know more. I was good at getting people to talk to me, you know, especially if they're shitbags, because I was actually interested in how they ended up where they were at. I was really good at talking to people. The things that I struggled with was anything revolving with kids. And I don't know that my head could have handled a full career, you know, in that type of environment or with that type of exposure. I don't know. And I'll never get to know. And part of me is kind of glad I don't. But the flip side is leaving law enforcement in that capacity, it left this giant hole. And it's not something that's easy to fill outside of it because it just doesn't exist anywhere else. The brotherhood, sisterhood, the camaraderie, you know, we're all blue, right? It doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. We're all blue. And I was spoiled. I had a phenomenal academy. You know, we've talked about some of the training background stuff that, you know, is parlayed into what I'm doing now, but I had a phenomenal academy. I had great people in the academy, great instructors. I had wonderful FTOs. I had a department that I loved. Everybody was, you know, it was empowering. You were empowered to be a police officer of the community. And I loved every second of it. Now, you know, fast forward, man, well over a decade and a half, kind of been able to get back into it, but in a different capacity. We are, my brothers, in arms, so to speak, Iman and Gabe, we put together a training company. We actually started this process about 5-6 years ago. And what our intent was to bring what Gabe's experience as a, special forces, soldier was and their level of capability to the patrol level. Because if you're going to do something, and this is just my personal statement, if you're going to do something that you want to learn how to do, I want to go find the best in the world at it. How do they do it? And what are they doing? Whether it's archery or, you know, marksmanship or 2-gun, you know, I do a lot of tactical game stuff. It's like, what are the best of the best of the best doing? Okay, now how can I get, you know, on that path? So with the law enforcement side, you know, the thing that changed a lot is the timelines. Everything's faster. We don't, I mean, yeah, we still have tactical response. We still have tactical teams, but the time in which those units take to spin up, deploy, and be on scene, unfortunately, because the way things have radicalized, it might be over, it might be too late, or there might be infinitely more victims because the patrol officers didn't have the equipment or the training necessary to be able to respond. Obviously, I'm hinting around and talking around the active shooter and the school shooter type scenarios. So our purpose and our goal with forming the training entity was, okay, how can we bring what the tier 1 SF badasses do across the globe that has been vetted, tested, and proven effective at that level? They are the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Okay, how can we distill that down to the patrol level? because rules of engagement, for one, are different, but then also training time. We don't have law enforcement agencies that can train 18 months for one single operation or one single mission.
Right.
This is every day on patrol, right? You got to be ready, and you are the first responder. And if you are not prepared, you better be prepared for the consequences of, if I don't have a capability and a skill set because I chose not to train, and I'm watching kids get shot down a hallway and I can't do anything about it because I'm not capable of doing anything about it, good luck living with that. Right. I couldn't. So that's been what we've been doing the last, coming up on 6 years plus now. A lot of it was just, formulating lesson plans. Iman works East Coast, just outside Boston. He's been DEA cert. That's actually how him and Gabe met. Iman also was Army, former Army veteran, and then they trained together. And I've known Gabe since he was basically in diapers at my house with my little brother. But that was where we started putting everything together of like, okay, can we do this? Can we put together a level of training to make officers that are on patrol, that are actual first responders, more capable and competent, and neutralize these threats quicker? That's what we've been doing, and that's hopefully not a very boring nutshell for people, but that's essentially the path of my last couple decades. From being the team athlete to the best team on the planet in the blue, and then now in a weird way, kind of in a coaching position, I guess you could say,
right.
And then trying to help as many other officers, because that's the other thing too. Whether I'd had a 20-year career or not, at the end of the day, everybody's going to be a former athlete. Everybody's going to be a former officer, mm-hmm. or former firefighter. And if you're not capable of training and passing along knowledge to improve the next generation, you're selfish. And you need to work with the next gen to get them trained up, because they don't know what they don't know. And so people shit on, officers a lot, and, this, that, and the other. And especially, like Iman and I, when we're doing, film reviews and things like that, it's like, you can see that they're not purposely trying to be incapable. They don't know any better because they haven't been provided the training, because their department hasn't prioritized it.
Right.
Whose fault is that? You don't know what you don't know until you know it. And that's our thing, is like, we want to educate as much as we can and empower as much as we can. And that, whether that's, the law enforcement side or even recreational shooting or like we've been talking about, archery and hunting, that's kind of where I'm at a stage in my life. Is I don't know much, but if I know one thing that can help somebody, I want to make sure that I've got it out there that they can better themselves with. And that's really kind of where my passion and purpose drives me.
Yeah, that's a good thing to fall into. There's so much of an identity that goes into being a law enforcement officer. And that's any of the uniform services, to be quite honest with you. There's an identity that goes along with that. And it's a very unique identity because, and I know this podcast isn't a law enforcement based podcast, but I want to touch on a few things. Like, it's really one of the very few professions where your friends introduce you. Hey, this is my friend, the cop, right? You,
yeah, right.
You're it, right? You are very, and I've heard you say this before on your own podcast, that we do have the front row seats to the greatest show on earth, right? And and it's hard when we have to walk away from that, especially when we're not ready. And I don't know if we're ever really ready for it. And that is because for so many of our brothers and sisters, that's their identity. That's who they are. They know nothing else. And I've really made it a point here recently to where I really focused on, and because of that over identification of it, because who are the ones? I mean, we're the ones that when we walk into a restaurant, where's a certain spot we're going to sit. Like our family will sit anywhere they want, but there's a certain spot we're going to sit, and it's generally with our back towards a wall so that we can see everything. Right? There's nothing behind us, and it's a protection thing. It's a tactical advantage for us that way. And and if you're not married to a cop or date a cop, like, you might understand the frustration it is as a significant other of a cop because of how we position those things, right? Or there's days that we walk into Walmart and we turn right back around, grab our partner's hand, we leave and say, we got to go. And eventually what that is because we seen something that was either really bad or we seen somebody in there that was going to be an issue. Like, and it's just it's life as a police officer, and then we over identify as one, and because of that, it's hard for us to help us to remember who we were before we were police officers. Because remember, we were people before we were the police, and
Yeah.
we forget those little things that made us who we are. And not to get too much into the weeds here, but I've had a conversation, and hopefully you've never had to have this conversation with your wife. But my wife sat me down one day. It was a very hard. It hit me really hard, and she said, "What happened to the Sean that I married? Because this is not it." And this is why I was still in the profession of law enforcement. I'm still there technically, but it's not my full-time profession now. And but I got to a point where everything that made Sean was gone. Like, I didn't hunt. I like, and as much as I loved to bow hunt, I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to fish.
Yeah.
I didn't want nothing that made me who I was. And that was my fault. I mean, I'll take responsibility because, some of the I will take all the responsibility because I'm the only one that controls how I respond to things. I was not taking care of myself the way I should have, and I allowed these things to build up over time, and it was starting to take its toll. And I got involved in an organization called Blue Courage, and they kind of opened a path, and to kind of their why is illuminating a path towards towards transformation. And as much as cheesy as that may sound, like, that's literally what they did for me. Like, they showed a path of like, hey, this is what's going on. Like, you got to take control of it and start to get back and start doing these things. And I got introduced to Gil Martin's work and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so now, like,
that's been very similar. Yeah. I mean, even though, you're on the one end of the spectrum where, lots of influence and impact and it changed your person. Mine was, a little bit different where it got taken away before I was ready for it to go.
right.
And I was not me. And actually, my wife and I talked about this. I would say the last, I don't know, maybe the last 2 years, last 3 years, I've gotten back to being, the best version. I honestly, I can look in the mirror and say, I felt like I was the best version of myself when I was, going through academy, the whole process, right? I was happy, loved it. I loved everything I was doing. I think 1 month I put in like 190 something hours. Now, flip side, is that sustainable? Probably not. But I was the best version of me because I was doing what I wanted to do, and it was great. At the same time, my daughter was, 15 months old maybe, but around there. So it wasn't like she had a whole lot of extracurriculars going on to where those would influence and I'd have to make compromises.
Right.
So I could do me at full speed and I was happy. And we were, the relationship was great and all that kind of stuff. And then when that got, when that was gone, you start, you can spiral. And for me, it's not, it's never not training or anything else. Because obviously, I ended up having my knee replaced about a year later, all those things. Fitness wise, stayed healthy, but then to the other end of like, oh, well, I'm working out twice a day. And, people are like, well, that's really healthy for you. And then the guys that know me are like, what's going on?
Right.
What are you doing? And it took a bit and to Gabe's credit, kind of metaphorically kicking me in the head and being like, hey, dickhead, what are you doing? And so he pulled me into a group and he's, a bunch of guys that, either active still or, veterans that have had extreme exposure to various things in combat. But it was a like-minded group of people with regards to it's group therapy for I guess a 30,000 foot term. And there's a clinical psychologist in the group who is a former ranger. So it's not like touchy-feely woo-saw, even though, we'll cry, we talk, all that kind of shit. But it works, and it got me back to, and then the biggest thing is like, you're not doing the things that would make you, I didn't shoot anything for a year and a half. I mean, I love pistol rifle. I love all that. I didn't touch any of my guns because I was depressed. It wasn't so much that it was, I just didn't want to do anything. So Gabe finally, and a couple of guys, but Gabe in particular, like, hey, you're going to sign up for this pistol competition out in Oregon. He's, not here. It was all on the, we're talking on the phone. He's like, you're going to sign up for this. You're going to go shoot it. You're going to show me your score. None of it talk shit about your score, but you're going to go do it. Right. And I did it, and I'd forgotten the things that I love about it. It's for me, it's inline problem solving in real time where you have to manipulate so many different things at a proficiency level
Mm-hmm.
that it's like riding my motorcycle, same thing. It's meditative because I don't have space in my head for anything other than what's right in front of me, read, react, respond.
Yes.
And I came to realize that's what I loved about the job. That's what I loved about going to work. I have no idea what's going to happen except for what's right in front of the windshield or what's right in front of me with this person right now. And I have to read, react, respond to it. And for me, the way that my brain's wired, that's calming. I am at my best when I can do that. And that really is what kind of tipped the rock over, a few years
Right.
ago for getting kind of back to me
Mm-hmm.
and then pick my bow back up and all that kind of stuff. And it's been so good, to do that. And I'll go and I'll get busy working again. I do, I tend to, if I'm not careful, and my wife is really good about this, if I'm not careful, I'll work more. When in doubt, do more work. And because I'm engaged with it, but then where's the balance, right? I'm not clear in my headspace. And things like tactical games and total archery challenge, elk hunting, those are the things that clear my head really well because I can't do anything but focus on exactly what's right in front of me. I mean, the best thing in the world is 6 hours on an animal and working because you can't think about anything else. You're so focused. And
Right.
for me, it's really, really good for my mental fitness.
Well, that present moment awareness is a big term right now, and like
Yeah.
that's how you find that is through that engagement because you found that engagement because right now, how do I want to term this? You're properly in your engagement level is proper at that point in time. You're not overly stimulated. You have that one. Your inflow is basically what's going on there. Like time standing still or time time doesn't matter. Like you are in that state where you are, like you said, your best. It is when that's happening, and that's at present moment awareness because we have like 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and most of them aren't great, right? And
Yeah.
but that allows you to quiet that 60 to 80,000 thoughts into one singular focused task. Now you might have to make multiple decisions and have multiple thoughts because a wind shift or whatever it is, whatever you're dealing with, right? But you're making decisions towards that one goal, and it's that present moment awareness that helps center you and bring you back down and keep you engaged and flow. And it's absolutely like if you're going to try to define meditation outside of what you see, outside of what you think meditation is, with your legs crossed and some primordial sounds of om going off, that's not necessarily what meditation is. It can be, but really it's what you just explained. It, like you said, is meditative. I cannot agree 100% with you like that. I mean, I cannot agree more with you. Let me put it that way, because that didn't sound right the first time I said it. Like that is 100% correct. So.
And that's, part of that too is why I picked my bow back up in such a voracious fashion. I've been shooting a bow since I was 4, maybe even 3. We got photos. I was vertical. There's, we had the opportunity in my backyard. If we could shoot. And I grew up with a bow in my hand. My dad put a recurve in my hand. And then my brother. And then he made me shoot recurve until I was 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally was able to get to a compound because I hate recurve. But I was left side dominant and right-handed, but I had to learn to shoot open eye, which all those things helped me for down the road because,
right,
like especially pistol rifle stuff,
mm-hmm.
I'm really good on target acquisition and anything that's kind of movement based. I struggle a little bit with like long range precision stuff because I'll start to get that kind of. It's not so much. It's hard to really get the tracking where I like read, react, respond. It's like I'd much rather shoot skeet than long range rifle, right? Because it's like here's a thing, boom, go. And the bow for me was that where once
mm-hmm.
I went from recurve and I shot well and I did my best to beat the adults when I was a kid and all that kind of stuff. But once I could pop over to the compound, there's so many more things going on there that every little error results in a result on target. And you've been shooting a bow long enough now. My daughter will look at me and I'll let an arrow go and I'll know exactly 10 or 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or God forbid an 8. God forbid an 8. But I'll know exactly when I release it. Like shit, I did. And she's like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "Honey, because I'm 43 and I've been doing this, literally since I was 3 or 4. I know." And the precision instrument that we shoot is so specific.
Mm-hmm.
When you're that level, and I'm not great. I shoot fine. It's like whatever.
Right.
I have a capacity for shooting, but you get to a point of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of reps. I mean, again, guys that I idolize, Cam Hanes, John Dudley, they know the nanosecond they release that arrow. Nope, that's not it. You just know.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's great because that level of focus, calming focus on every little thing. If my head's somewhere else, my shooting reflects it.
Oh yeah.
So if yoga works for you, or if a Buddhist monastery at the top of a mountain works for you with the jars that make the noise, that's awesome. For me, what works for me is especially shooting. It's where I find that kind of zen, and I'm glad I'm back to it. I got back to it a bunch of years ago. I also, after my knee replacement, I can physically do things that I couldn't do. I couldn't really. Hunting was hard because it was painful. Now I can't run, I can't jump, but I can hike all freaking day long. So an elk hunt for me it doesn't hurt. I mean, it's pride hurts sometimes, but I can
tell me about it.
Do it, and then the shooting, right? So it's like for me, the shoot, especially like Northwest Mountain Challenge and Total Archery Challenge, and or on the things that go bankside, the tactical games. And, that stuff for me is where, one, those are your people too. You've got a lot of people that are in the same kind of mindset. So you've got that community back again. And of course, it's like, if you shoot well, you're going to get shit for it. If you shoot poorly, you're going to get shit for it. So it's
absolutely,
it really feels like you're back in a team room, or back in a briefing where it's like everybody's there flipping you crap, but at the same time, that the second shit goes down, they're going to be right there with you too.
Right. And I think it's a good thing to know, like, I'm glad you mentioned that similarity. Like, it will never be exactly the same, but it's good, right? It's a good feeling to be a part of that group. And if you're willing to look out there and find it, put yourself out there, you'll find it. They'll be there for you. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be the next day, but if you, I don't want to sound like, I don't know what that song is. If you just hang on, everybody hurts. I get that. Just hang on. But I promise you will find, like, if you put yourself out there and allow yourself to not be that one identity, you'll find a good substitute. Like I said, it's not a 100% the same. It will never be the same. And I say that today, like I still work alongside police officers. Like, there are things that I miss about it. Like, I miss teamwork. I was on our entry team here. I know 5,800 people live in Yerkesville, and you're like, entry team. Like, we had a small team that we had that kind of worked throughout the county. But I was on the entry team. Like, I miss that kind of stuff. I miss that, being part of that environment. Training helped with that a little bit, because I'm training alongside people like me, and training people who are like me. And when I say this next one, or want to be like me, not because they want to be, not because I think I'm this great thing. No, they want to be in the same positions that I got to experience, right? They want to be on a team. They want to experience these things. So they want that shared experience, and that helps, right? It's never the same. But it is it's therapeutic. It's good. I love being a part of that. And, that kind of really hurt when they took that away from us. What we were talking prior to the podcast, when the state made a change in how they were going to handle police training, and 30 of us lost our jobs. Like, that hurt, like, because that's taken me away from that environment that I've come to love, throughout my professional career. Because, to be honest with you, all I've known is law enforcement. I went to vocational school for law enforcement. I went to college for law enforcement, and then I got into law enforcement. Like, I was going to be a cop ever since I was a kindergartner. So, like, that's what I was meant to do. And people ask me, well, why? I'm like, to be honest with you, I can't tell you why. Like, someone
that's
will tell
what you're wired for.
Yeah, it was like, somebody will tell you, oh, I want to help people. Like, okay, that's great, but that's not the real reason why I want to be here. And it's like, it's just, I don't know why. It's part of what I do. I like doing it. I like helping people, but it's not why I'm here. And exactly what you said is what I was just kind of wired to do. But anyways, so you sound like you've had some really good early experiences that kind of brought you into, like, the outdoor world. And you mentioned your father. So do you kind of, like, attribute your father to a lot of your early mentorship and turn you into bring you into the outdoors, or is there someone else that kind of filled that void for you?
No, nobody else had filled that void for me. I would say that and my mom will laugh at this, and so will my brother. Um, we, I mean, every vacation was, in the summer it was bow season, right? So we're camping, we're hunting, it's all this kind
Hmm.
of stuff. Not successfully, but we're out there.
Right.
And, or duck hunting in the fall or whatever. And it's like most of the memories I have, a lot of hard work, minimal to no success. Getting attacked by bees. That was a whole thing with a trip to the ER. So it wasn't like this, like, oh my gosh, it was this whole rosy, it's like, no, my memories of hunting, it just fucking sucks. It was not, everything was hard. It was never like, oh, this massive record bowl success. It was like, no, none of that. It was horrible. But the funny thing is that like, same as like I hate fishing too. Like I just hate fishing. It's never been, but I have fond memories of like, man, I'm really glad that I got to do that.
Right.
Now, part of it I think is the kids, and like, so my daughter, she turned 12 last year, and I took her out, and that wasn't on me. I never actually pushed for her ever on any of
Hmm.
that stuff, but something made an impact when she saw dad putting food in the freezer. And then, I introduced her to shooting. She'd been shooting her bow. She's on her school archery team now. She's a remarkably good archer. She's really good with a rifle too. She she's like, I want to do this. I'm like, this is the child, mind you, whose, entire life revolves around loving fuzzy creatures,
Hmm.
now wants to go elk hunting. I'm like, okay, this is going to go one of two ways. We're going to be out there and it's not going to happen, or we're going to be out there and it's going to happen, and it's, she'll be an emotional wreck. Because that was me, right? First time I killed any animal, I felt terrible, and feeling terrible while still executing, the task is one thing, but
Right.
you still you got to be careful, because, especially, like, I felt a responsibility there, as my dad did with me, of, if you're going to put a kid or somebody new on there, you better train them so that they're proficient, so that it's ethical and as painless as possible for the animal, right? Because I knew that this was going to be tough anyways, but it'd be way worse if target panic and a shot goes off, and now they're wounded and they're struggling and suffering. That's an image burned in your brain that never goes away.
Right.
And that's how my dad, with me, it was, my shooting proficiency was through the roof. And then, now you're old enough. Okay, so you're coming with us, or coming with me. And my dad, it was funny, and he might listen to this, he might not, but hunting was the goal, killing was not, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And I think he primarily enjoyed being out, and especially because, I mean, we had plenty of guys that we hunted with that hit record bulls, and I think my dad honestly enjoyed that more than the actual act itself. So there was never really a huge drive towards our personal success comparative to making sure that the guys that we were out with. It was the same couple guys every year. But in retrospect, it's like, well, that would have been nice if it was us once in a while too. But hunting for him was never something about the acquisition of an animal at the end. It was about the experience of being out there, which, for a kid who's a sports driven kid, that, scoreboards are scoreboards for a reason. If you're not winning, you're losing. If you're not coming home with something, it's like, what a waste of time. This sucks. But as I've gotten older, I understand, there's a difference there of what the purpose is and the experience with your kid
Hmm.
versus just tagging an animal, right? So that was kind of my upbringing, and I think a big piece of that's still in me. The flip side of that, though, is I am me, and I am totally miserable to be around if I get blanked on a hunting trip or a hunting season, especially if it's, all the good plan, you scouting, trail cams, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And then, like what happened this last year, the spot, our kind of area, um, it's not as secret as it used to be. And there were a lot more people.
Hmm.
And I just got kind of blown out with people, and then just animals. They're not dumb. They hightailed it and they were gone.
Hmm.
That's hard on me. The worst though was you were kind of asking about this. Like, it was probably 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. had a great shot, lined up, ready to go, and I missed. And going back on it, I either didn't have my dope set right, dialed in right. Maybe it was a deflection. I was shooting kind of across the canyon, a little bit of a canyon. I had a high ground position. And it was great, and took the shot. It didn't. It didn't. And then they were like, "Cool, we're out of here," and I missed. And that was it. It was end of season. That ate me for 364 days. And so I am to an extent a very results driven person on that as far as that goes. And that's why I trained harder, and it was like go harder.
Mm-hmm.
Then the following year, yep, got it done. So I realized what mistakes I made, learned from it, went out, did it, got it done, felt better about myself. Which sounds kind of stupid, but at the same time, it's me, and that's how I'm wired. And I know I drove everybody crazy because it was 2 months of just being like, I suck at this. This is stupid. Why did I buy this Kifaru bag? Like, why did I do any of this? I got no business needed.
I don't know why I bought this bow. I don't know why I went through, did all this. I don't know why I spent all that time away from the family. I could have been home with the daughter, stuff like that. You're absolutely 100% right. But also at the same time, it doesn't sound stupid, to be honest with you, because that's, that failure is what drove your success. And I've said it, we're only 7 episodes in. This will be number 8 probably, unless, I throw a couple others in between, since, the reason we're talking is to introduce a cool concept that you run, or a cool competition that you run, which is coming up here soon. But but I've said it already, like, there is no real success without failure. And we spend too much time like looking down on failure as being this bad negative thing. And failure in itself is not bad. That means you actually have the courage to try. It's when you don't learn from that, like, if you say, like, in that exact same instance that you just got done talking about, that didn't drive you to be, that didn't motivate you to go and work harder. You just, whatever. And you went back and did the exact same thing and failed the exact same way again. Like, that's when failure is a problem, right? It's because there was no learning opportunity taken away from it, right?
Yeah. And I think part of that too is pain is the greatest teacher, right? If something hurts, you stop doing it. I mean, that's what we're wired for. But for me, failing at something hurts.
It does.
It doesn't matter what it is. Some people are indifferent to it, and I kind of, I laugh about my dog Riggs. Like, Riggs his entire life is ball. Ball is life. Like, he's just so happy all the time, and he's just the biggest dipshit flat coat retriever. And just ball is life, and he's so happy. And it's like, oh, okay, I got ball. Oh, I didn't get ball. He's just happy. And I think about the people out there that walk around like him, where ball is life, and it's like they're just indifferent towards failure. They're just indifferent. It's like they're kind of just whatever, and they seem happy. And I'm kind of like, man, that would be nice, like, just to not really care as much, and be like, whatever. Right. But then the reality is we both know that's not quality. Eventually they'll hopefully smarten up and realize I missed out on a lot of opportunity for cool things.
Right.
But if you're not willing to put yourself in a position to where you're learning something, hopefully it's, painful, like missing a shot is emotionally painful. It's not, physical harm.
Right.
But pain is the greatest teacher. And if you don't allow for that, you're not going to push as hard, because I don't want to feel that again. No. And the funny thing is, and I don't want to like go down. I mean, shit, we could do hunting stories all day long. But my daughter's this year, we just timing wise with school for her and how it went. We couldn't do bow, we had to do rifle, and so I built her a rifle, 6.5 Creedmoor, identical to mine, same everything. Fully suppressed, 6.5, same round, everything. Because I only wanted to make sure that I had one windage and dope chart memorized and not have to do a whole second caliber because I can't remember.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And we went out and we spent a week out there and had all the great intel and 4 or 5 days. We hiked in, brutal weather, terrible, horrible, heavy winds, rain, sideways, all this kind of stuff. Super cold in the morning. She didn't complain once. We saw 4 elk at about 600 yards the first morning, and on a track that I was like, okay, we're going to be good. We're going to be patient. We're going to sit and wait. We didn't see another animal for 4 days. And it was rough. And I knew, like, okay, well, we'll have one more chance of this. She didn't complain once. And went back home, kind of recalibrated. I was like, well, okay, a little bit different strategy. Second time out, we'll go a little bit later because we have a little more time in the season. And we did. And so we got out, and better strategy. First night we were out, or first afternoon. And she's lined up, ready to go. Animal in sights, and I spooked him
Hmm.
and blew her opportunity. And she thought, rightfully so, that dad knows what he's doing. He must have made that noise for a reason. No, I fucked up. And the gut drop. I have never felt so horrible in my life with anything of my own. Like it wasn't even close to the missed shot from a couple of years before.
Mm-hmm.
I felt terrible because I ruined her chance. I mean, it was like, and you know how it goes. You might not see another animal again.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't blast out of there. They kind of just turned and like walked off. But like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it. So we, go back, head back, do our thing, get up the next morning, go back out, got a pretty good plan, pretty good space. Hey, there's a herd of about 200 elk about a mile away. Let's go put a stalk on. 6 hours in. Working our way in, and I'm contracting a lot of work here, but working our way in, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just the way that they were set up. And I didn't say we oversnuck, but I have a tendency to do that every once in a while. I'll get the wind in my favor and I'll start moving, and then it's like I start getting too close. It's like shit, kind of box yourself in. But we needed to work up to where she could get a shot, because if it was me, I could have been standing. There was a berm. I had a shot, but she's 5'6" and 12 years old. She didn't have a shot, so we needed to work a little bit, probably about 40 yards further. And I'm checking, I'm watching, and there's we're in the middle of this herd, and they got spotters up and bedded down, and they're not spooked to us. You can smell them. I mean, she had a wild experience for her.
Mm-hmm.
And elk stink, and they're assholes. They're not nice to each other, and they're horrible, rotten individuals. So she got all this like intake, right, and she's ready to go. And I'm like, okay, we go about 40 yards, but we're going to need to crawl. I put my binos in my harness, my marsupial harness that I love to death.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot to close the flap, and I bent over to start crawling. My binos fell out and hit the ground.
Oh no!
Boop, and heard everybody stands up and looks right at us, and I'm halfway bent over and I'm looking at them, and we stood there for about 3 minutes, totally frozen. I'm like, please don't blow this, please don't blow this, and then they all just walked off and said goodbye for the rest of the day. And I was like, I just did it again. I just completely ruined her hunt again. In a 24-hour period, it's been twice. And that feeling, much like the night before, the worst feeling I've ever had in my life. So the cycle of this, I could live with myself with that either. They would have it later that evening, because we hadn't spooked them too bad. I was like, well, hopefully they wrap around here. She put a shot that was 1,000 times more difficult than anything I'd tried to set her up for already, on an elk at about 140 yards, downhill, almost a 40-degree angle, within, I'd say, 3 minutes of shooting light left remaining, and it was amazing. And then we were out till 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was about 14 degrees, and her job became build the fire, keep the fire going. We processed half of it together, and then just the time wise, I didn't want her to freeze, because it's a legit exposure thing. And so
Right.
she was by the fire, she'd come over, help out, and go back and warm up. And it was the single greatest experience, honestly, that, as far as anything I have ever had hunting, was
Mm-hmm.
that right there, because my 12-year-old got it done at the without all of the issues that her dad tried to cause for her. She did it anyways, and it was so amazing. I mean, it's so amazing, and that's the kind of thing that And now for the rest of the year, she's feeding us, right? I mean,
Right.
that's in the freezer, and I don't know how you replicate that anywhere else in life. I definitely don't know how you replicate it by going to the grocery store together. But for us, I mean, now this next year, with the school schedules and things, it'll be Bo this year for sure. But yeah, I mean, that was one of those things where it's like, I felt personal failure and things hurt. I have never felt a pain like that for what I did to her. those first two opportunities. Oh my man. And she was, she's like, that's okay, Dad. Da, 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 da. I'm like, she was sad and upset, but at the same time, like, got over it as soon as we got back, and was talking to mommy and all that kind of stuff. And, we had food, but, yeah, it was pretty intense. And I can see where my dad, probably had a lot of those similar, experiences that I just, we don't talk emotions really. But I can imagine that had crossed his mind, or crossed his, experience with my brother and I at least once or twice, where things just didn't work out for us. And man, I'll tell you what, Watching your kid not be able to be successful because of something you did, worst thing
Oh,
ever.
yeah. But both my kids have been out a couple, at least a couple times hunting, and you try to get things just to go right, and I just because I feel bad for them when they're not successful because of something, a learning opportunity for themselves, let
Yeah,
alone if it's something that I created, that I accidentally created, or
yeah,
I accidentally did.
yeah.
So
It's hard enough.
yeah, and 12 years old and has already shot her first elk. I'm 39, soon to be 40, and I'm yet to shoot an elk. So, uh,
Get out to Oregon.
so I gotta say I'm a little jealous a little bit, but
Yeah,
I'm very actually I'm really happy for her, and that's a great proud dad moment. And despite your best efforts, she was still successful. So,
yeah.
uh,
She's successful in spite of her father. That's for sure.
well, and it comes down to it, it's not like you meant to do that. It's just mistakes that happen, and that's part of the game. Like,
Yep.
and it those things do happen, and I'm glad she was able to to rise above those and not allow that to define her season or define her moment, and continue to push forward and be successful. So, but she
Yeah.
probably gets that honestly because after talking to you for the past, I think we've been talking for almost 3 hours now.
Yeah.
I've gotten a feeling that that's an honest trait that was passed down by somebody in her genealogy. So,
Yeah.
um,
Definitely gonna be your mom. Her
yeah,
mom does a
yeah,
much better job than I
you
do.
being a humble guy that you are, that's what you're going to say. That's what most guys say, anyways. Yeah, it's definitely her mom.
Absolutely.
It's definitely got that from your mom. But on the vice versa, whenever they do something that's not conducive to the learning environment, or something that goes against the grain, that's when we get blamed for it. So whatever.
That's also true.
That's when we get to play for it. She's just like you. I know.
Yeah. Well,
So, well, you kind of mentioned this earlier. Like, I came across, we met through your Badges and Bows initiative,
yep.
and I actually came across that. So I was on Instagram one day, and I follow Iron Will Outfitters.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the guys that was in the group that was in the competition, Zach, I think he goes
Yep.
by Fit Cop on
Pick
his
top five. Yep.
yep, on his Instagram handle, was featured on an Iron Will short, or Iron Will feed, for shooting an apple like a William Tell. I'm like, huh.
Hmm.
I was like, I did that. I did something like that. Like I've shot at 100 yards before. I kind of did a little like stupid production for it, and I forwarded it to him. He's like, "Oh, dude, that's freaking awesome. Are you part of the competition?" I'm like, "What competition?" He's like, "Oh, this Badges and Bows. This guy Jake, he runs it, and I don't think it's too late to kind of get signed up or kind of do it, like So he kind of sent me the link to your page for Badges and Bows, and I got on there. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what was the inspiration behind all that? You're a trainer at heart, right? And and I kind of understand that, a little bit of that, but really, what was the inspiration to kind of you're taking this concept, like you're taking a few passions. Obviously, the uniform services is a deep passion of yours, and bow shooting is another passion. What inspired you to kind
Yeah.
of merge those together and kind of give back to the passions that you love?
Well, a lot of it comes out of my own, like I was kind of saying before, sounds really soft to, my own journey of personal discovery, but it really was like, what the bow does for me and so many people is something that needs to be shared. And I think something that's been lost with our first responders and military, basically anybody wearing a badge, right? Police officers, firefighters, veterans, is something that can bring that community together of share. We've all got a shared experience, not necessarily the same mechanism to get to the same end state, but we're kind of a similar people. But we don't really have a lot of things out there geared towards bringing that community together that isn't either cliche or quite frankly just stupid. And I wanted to do something fun
Right.
and have it be unique and objective based and physically challenging because most of us, yeah, we want stuff that's hard because we like doing hard things. And so the whole thing was kind of, I was just kind of sitting here and I was like, I just want to put something together where, we can help some guys and gals put some tools and network together with others in their field of work that, nobody else outside of the bulk of first responders or veterans can really understand the stress and the, you know, whether it's PTS, occupational stress, whatever you want to, whatever label you want to put on it. Just so many people just don't understand it. And it's really hard to communicate that, right? You know, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, you know, and further back, you're not going to have those conversations because it's, you know, basically just shut up and deal with it and don't complain. And, you know, I don't think it's a coincidence that in that same kind of mindset, while the levels of stress have exponentially increased, so has the rate of suicide amongst our first responders and our military folks. And it's just, it's obvious because we're not having conversations in communities that we need to be having. And for me, and it was just a, you know, I'm like, hey, archery's got this unique capacity to be extremely technical, physical, and incredibly meditative and therapeutic for me. Maybe it will be for some other people. And you're going to get better shooting. You know, you're going to do unique challenges, unique events. I'm giving away really cool stuff. And it's all stuff that's, you know, field tested, that's out, you know, it's not, I bought it all and gave it away. It's all stuff that I use or have used and love to death because I've abused it and it works.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a little bit of a fortunate backyard where the bow rack is only about an hour and a half for me. And so I went down and I talked to Lisa and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. It's only going to, if you got a badge, you can do it. If you're firefighter, cop, military, if you're wearing a badge, you can play. If you're a civilian, go volunteer, get yourself a badge, you can come play. But I just wanted to keep it just for that. And
right.
There were some people like, you know, of course, like everything else, somebody's always mad about something. There were some people like, well, that's not very fair. I'm like, okay, great. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. But it was literally just, you know, I wanted to do like a 60-day thing where we had 6 challenge shots, to shoot and give away some cool shit and have fun and not really like, there's no objective to it as far as like, oh, at the end of this, I'm going to do this and that and the other. It's really just like, I just kind of felt like I was hosting an online party and putting together a virtual shoot competition, which that was the other thing too, is I started looking around. I'm like, somebody's got to be doing this. Nobody's doing virtual archery in any capacity. I mean, COVID, there were a couple things here and there, but nobody was doing anything like this. I was like, well, that's kind of, all right, well, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's stupid and the same person wins everything, which kind of happened. But it turned out that, you know, I mean, I think all in all, there were about 350 shooters. Not everybody could do every challenge, as I learned. You know, the wildfire season picked up a little bit sooner,
right.
and quite frankly, June was a little bit wild for our PD.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some folks that couldn't finish the challenges or couldn't finish the whole season just because of the timing. So I'm going to start a little bit earlier this year to try to avoid that, especially for the wildfire and the wildland guys, because they were kicking ass. I mean, typical firefighters, they didn't got shit else to do but practice and train. So they're shooting their bow at the station, you know. I thought
right.
for sure out of the whole thing, our fire guys were going to win the bulk of the competitions, and it ended up being PD. So I think 5-1. So good for Blue. I had videos submitted and I couldn't post them, but I counted them for scores and,
right.
and sent prizes their way. But I had videos, you know, there were guys deployed with their bow in the sandbox shooting these shoots. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like,
that is really
you know,
cool.
Yeah, and some stuff, you know, people didn't want me to share, but they just wanted to submit it. I'm like, totally fine with that.
Right.
If anybody questions the outcome, I'd be like, hey man, look, I'll show you the video. I'm not posting it, but it's like, it's, you know, it's on the honor system. If you're going to cheat on this, like, highly doubt it. Plus, it's not that important. Everybody was great. The community, the trash talk, everything was exactly what I was hoping it would be. And then just literally the shooting itself, the actual challenges, they were hard. And
yeah,
numbers people put up and some of the shots people put up, it's like, that's just next level. I mean, there are some unbelievable shooters out there, and I don't think it's a coincidence the bulk of the guys and gals that shot this that then, you know, went into, whether it's our Total Archery Challenge or like the Mountain Challenge series or their hunting seasons. We filled a lot of freezers this year. I mean, there were a lot of follow-up shots and you know, pictures and follow-ups of, you know, I mean, pretty successful bow seasons. So for me, it checked every box I wanted it to. I really wanted to have something where it was, you know, a way of socially integrating a group of people that aren't really the best at branching out sometimes and connecting. And the bow was a great excuse because, you know, literally the bow and arrow ties every human being together back to the start of humanity. And so it's this conduit of communication. And what better way to do that for, you know, a bunch of folks maybe going through some struggles than having an online challenge where you can come together and, you know, you might not win, but you're going to get better. The shoots are hard. Everybody gets to you know, you get to do as much as you can. And it's tough, and you get better at it, and it's fun. And that, nothing higher order than that. No big, big promotional plan or any kind of. No, I just did it because it was, I wanted to have a party, kind of like a backyard barbecue, and do it virtually with the bows, and it turned out to be okay.
I think it was more than okay. I think it turned out great. Because there's still a lot of us that still kind of talk to each other on those on that little group chat that you put together for us.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think we're as active as what we were there for a while, but somebody posts something and it kind of takes its own life of its own. And one of the sidebar conversations we have on there is Keith Daniels' disdain for Crocs. And
I'm right there with him. I'm right there with him.
Well, good, because I'm getting ready to send you an excerpt from another episode of this podcast. We're talking about camp shoes, and our favorite camp shoes happen to be Crocs. So I'm like, I got a little excerpt of it that I'm getting ready to like post, and I'm going to send it over to the group so you guys can sit and get all grossed out by the Crocs and stuff. And I got to be honest, I shot some of those competitions in Crocs just because of that. So.
Oh yeah, no, that became a whole thing, and that's kind of that stuff. It's like we were talking about before, that team room stuff, where it's like it won't make any sense to anybody else. Like I know one of you guys, it's going to be a selfie of your Crocs, and it's going to be like 30 of us are going to be like, oh, for God's sake, that's the funniest thing ever, and then the rest of people will be like, what the hell are you guys talking about? But it's just those little things that come out, right? And
right.
It's like, yeah, I'm right there with Keith. Crocs are the only thing worse than Crocs are grown men wearing flip flops. Oh,
I don't wear flip flops. I'm good. I'm good there. My toes are way too hairy for me to walk around with a pair of thong flip flops on.
That's funny.
I don't do that. Dude, the challenges you put together, challenges you had last year was like, were a lot of fun. I missed out on the Vegas shoot. I didn't get it. I didn't start until the William Tell challenge.
It was a good opener.
It was like I'm kind of jealous I missed out on that one because that one looked like it was fun. Then you kind of circle back kind of to it with what was the 1440 challenge. I'm like, that is a lot of.
1440 was brutal.
That's a lot of arrows. I'm like, but but it takes those reps, and I'm glad to see that there was actually a good correlation between people who got involved in that challenge and the success that they seen later on, and that maybe not necessarily that was that challenge. Like rather they went to their Total Archery Challenge or their Mountain Fest or their mountain festivals, or they went out into the back country and came out successful, or they went in the back 40 and came out successful. Like I don't want to toot my own horn, but I shot really well this year bow hunting. Like and I really do attribute a lot of that to that challenge. And the challenge was the fact that it got me out there, getting outside my typical comfortable zone, because normally I'd go out there, I'll shoot 100 yards here and there, but most of it's on that flat range, shooting at the same targets, the same thing. Like, a 3D target's one thing. When you try to actually hit a specific spot on a dot target, like that takes a whole nother level of concentration to be consistent with that. Like you really got to get in tune with that. And I can attest, like that little bit of practice, not a little bit, it was a lot of practice. That should translate into what you've seen. And I'm glad that it did, because I mean, that's a great sidebar, that, I think, to be honest with you, like, no, there's so many of us that we won't touch our bows until like, if it's a week before season, that's actually like optimistic. It's a week. It's usually the day before we go throw a couple arrows and hopefully the string's okay. If not, we're going to the bow shop the day before season. Can you fix this? And they're already 12 bows deep already, if not more. So no, dude, that was,
and it's one of those things. The better you get at it, the better you get at it. And it's, to your point of shooting smaller targets or trying to shoot closer or stretching the distances, aim small, miss small, right? When you start putting the hyper precision into things, or even just the physical volume and capability of, I can do this more, it's weird how your skill set improves and your success rates improve. Almost like when you put the work and the effort in, good things happen.
What was that? Well, hold on. Can you repeat that? We repeat that one more time. I didn't quite catch it. What was that?
On which part? The skill set improvement?
Yeah, I'm being sarcastic because I agree. Like, the part, if you put the work in, what happens? You get better. I mean, I don't understand. Well, I have a theory, right? And I kind of follow Simon Sinek on this theory, but I'm not going to go down that road. Like, folks, you don't get better if you don't work at it. Like, if there's something you want to be better at, you got to put work in it. And there's a path to mastery, and I'm going to try to say who came up with this concept, but the path of mastery is usually like it's heart set, mindset, skill set, then tool set. Too many of the times, like, and you could probably put a face to this person that they want to be the best shooter they can. So instead of putting the time and effort into building that heart set and mindset, like learning how to actually do this and then honing in on that skill set to perfect it, they jump right to tool set because they buy the latest and greatest
Right.
thing that guarantees them that they're going to shoot better because of it. Or they always blame the equipment. Like, it's not. I even if you went today, right, and you bought a mid-grade or low-grade bear archery bow, and I'm not picking on bear, I like bear archery, but they're not. You're talking $200-$300 compared to the $1,400 Matthews Lift that's out there right now. Like, you can buy that $300 bow, and I guarantee you that if your fundamentals are sound, you're going to shoot that bow just fine. It's
Right.
there's not a bad bow from any major manufacturer right now. It's not the tool, right? It's not the tool set. It's because you've forgotten the most important steps that came before, and that's the heart set, the mindset, and the skill set leading up to it.
Yeah, and that's where too, people they'll overbow themselves, and they. My daughter asks us all the time. She's like, "Can you still shoot a recurve?" I'm like, "I can. I just don't want to." But I can, give me a minute and I'll get back down to like whatever that tool is, and I can shoot it pretty well. But if you take somebody who's not got the skill set to be able to shoot the Ferrari compound, they're not going to shoot any better just because of that bow. It's so much more precise. You're going to put it, in the F1 or the race car world. You're going to put it in the wall. You're not going to buy your way out of poor mechanics. You're not going to buy your way out of poor technique. And just like the hunting season, the guys and gals that shot the challenge, yeah, they were more successful because they put way more rounds down. Most of them put way more rounds down range with a purpose and a difficulty level beyond which they normally did. That results in results. it's not, and like I said, it's fun. I mean, and people won a bunch of free stuff, and actually I can't say they won it. They earned it because they outshot everybody. But it just turned into something that was exactly what I was hoping for, which was, community driven, community building, an excuse to have a good conversation, and at the same time get out and do some really hard stuff with our bows. That is, most of the drills, like the Deadly drill, is one of my favorites, and I pulled it in the Vegas shoot. I mean, those are standards, right? But then a couple of them, it's like, let's put a little twist on the standard because the twist is fun. And this year there'll be some twists as well with, I'm for those that have shot last year. Yes, the 1440 will be back. That was the one that just that scared some people. And of all things, my brother won it. I was just like, oh, that's awesome. Like, it was great, and it was close too. But that one was really hard, and then other guys really struggled with the Cam Hanes shot. And, it's cold day one. I'm going to put a little wrinkle on that for this year too, to make it even a little bit more interesting. But these are not, they're not gimmicky things. The guy that shoots your black rifle, the trick shot stuff, it's not that. It's just, they're just hard. It's challenging. Some are very physically challenging and some are mentally challenging. But all of them are, they're all fun. And when you blow it and you suck, you just want to go do it again.
Right. Well, I got my hats off to you because that was a great idea, and it was a lot of fun, and I think you can safely say you accomplished all the goals you wanted to. You built team, you had that team building, you challenged your brothers and sisters to be better. They took on the challenge and they walked away with being better at the end. And it was fun. And most of us didn't know we were doing it. It was just fun. It was just fun. And there was that team building, shit talking, everything that you want from this type of event. It happened. Like, that's why TAC is so popular, right? There technically people walked away with some prizes and stuff. I get that, but it's not a big competition, right? It's us challenging ourselves, and that's basically what that became. We were challenging ourselves and each other, and as one person did well, another person posted something that was even better, and that drove us to even pursue to be better at that. And it was just a great time, and I'm looking forward to it coming back this year. So are there any new challenges? Well, what can we expect? And you kind of hinted on a few things already. So what can we expect for this year for the challenge?
Well, I'm probably going to start out kind of the same way, same format. I took a lot of feedback from everybody, and because it's like anything else, can I improve? And I want to improve. And there's a couple things. I mean, obviously, starting out with something like the 300 is going to be standard because you kind of got to have a place to start, jumping off point, and just sort of get, not just get going, but also let's ease into this a little bit. I don't necessarily think starting off with the 1440 would be the best idea.
No, probably
but
not.
also, as people get more accustomed to it, sometimes, I didn't have this target that I needed, like a 5-star. It gives everybody a chance to, if they need to get a 3-star, they need to buy a 5-star or whatever. They can do that. And so I'm pretty sure it'll start off with the Vegas again, just because it's a standard and everybody's used to it. And then we'll kind of get into some other stuff. I got a couple ones I don't really want to say yet, but one of them on there's a little tweak to the Cam Hanes one that I want to make because it'll still be in there, that single cold shot. Kifaru did a deal. It was with their employees, and it was basically, first shot of the morning. I think they were doing it from 30 yards, and it needed to be a vital shot, or you don't eat for the rest of the day until dark. So basically, you're fasting if you're not making the shot. And I'm very tempted to roll that in there with us as, the Cam Hanes shot was cold one, and then the tiebreaker was distance. I'm thinking about keeping it the same, and then at the same time adding in that little wrinkle of, hey, if you don't, it might not be the dead center, the tightest of center, but if it isn't in the vitals, guess what? You're going to be fasting that day. So just to make it a little bit extra pressure, because it's, that artificial creation of pressure is hard to do to where you can simulate what it's like to be on a hunt. That one's a pretty good one, because if you're hungry the rest of the day, you're not going to forget about that shot you missed.
No, you're not.
Yeah, so there's a couple in there, that I'll be adding. The biggest thing, honestly, the thing I like the most is like picking kind of the prizes, because I like giving stuff away. It's fun. And then Lisa, I mean, I last year too. It wouldn't have been what it was without Lisa. She was so amazing at supporting, my big dumb mammal idea with actual like plans as far as gear and equipment and swag and just ideas that she had for things. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that, and I've used that thing a million times. That's such a great idea. She was remarkable, and again, I'm spoiled because bow rack's in my backyard, and
right.
I am 100% going to be right back down there, kidding everything. Everybody will be getting a bow rack hat. If you're PD, it'll be blue. If you're fire, it'll be red. If you're military, it'll be green.
Awesome.
I've got a few other things going in the standard kits with that too that are gonna go out, and then like last year, there's all the stuff that I would love to give everybody, and then there's stuff that's like what's practical and what can I give. In the sense of rangefinders not in my wheelhouse as far as affordability.
Right, I understand that.
But I got a pretty good sense there might be. I processed 2 full elk with my Montana knife company, the knock-on edition one this last year, and that knife was unbelievable. I mean, I've always had sharp knives.
Right.
That thing was out of control. It was like, this is amazing. Like it made, the deficiency in my processing time was not to do the knife. It was 100% due to me and being cold. But I have a very strong inclination that will probably be in that kind of that grand prize thing, because it's a little bit more expensive than everything else. But that knife was something spectacular this year, and it was the first time I've gotten to use one in the field. And I'll never carry anything else again. I actually went and bought one for my daughter, and I've got the larger Skinner this year as well. That's for sure going in, and a couple of little things that I found, and a couple other people have given me some feedback on as far as kit goes. That I like kit, for stuff that's functional. And there's been some new things out this last year that I'm pretty excited to include, and we'll just see where it snowballs into.
Dude, that sounds like this is going to be a good time. So if someone's interested in joining in and getting involved in this, A, how do they find you to do this? And B, how do they get in or to do it?
So the Instagram handle is just Badges Bows, because Badges and Bows wasn't available for some reason. So it's just at Badges Bows. We run the whole thing there. You can go take a look at last year's stuff because it's all posted. I'm not a social media person necessarily, so it's like the shots are up there from last year. You can see when people submitted the video, I post the ones that were in contention, and then kind of do the walkthroughs and the explanations and things. You get a feel for what last year looked like, and then like I said, I'm not really like super crazy social media, but once we kind of get closer to it, we'll start picking up on that. And I'm tempted to start it around tax day this year because April 15th sucks. So let's make it something fun to look forward to. But the real
Absolutely.
reason for that, honestly, the real reason for starting earlier was legitimately our wildland guys that got their butts kicked last year from such an early fire season, and this one is looking like it's going to be the same because snowfalls have been really rough and not super positive, and so the guys that were in Montana and Wyoming and Oregon and California and Washington just got absolutely hammered really early last year, and I really would like to be able to get them through the whole challenge. So I want to start a little bit sooner when it's still wet and get them the best shot at making a full thing. Because those firefighters, I mean, they got a lot of time to practice. They should be pretty successful here. But
You would think, but I
I
don't
want to
know.
give them a chance.
They got to quit polishing the bells back on the station if they're going to get anywhere. But anyways, that's my challenge to you firefighters out there. All right, so if someone's interested in following along with Jake Mahar, where can they find you at? Because I know you're involved in a couple other things. So real quick, what else are you involved in? Where can they find you?
Well, yeah. So badges and bows on that side of it, and then on our other side, honestly, the thing that's probably going to get the most. If anybody's interested in anything else, I co-host with my buddy Iman the Project Sapien podcast. It's law enforcement military podcast specifically. We talk a lot of training, multiple levels of that over there, and then on I guess I don't know regular Instagram. Forge Performance is where I tend to reside with a lot of things about the training side of things. Whether it's Murph Challenge or Overwatch and other groups that I work with, but those are kind of the places I don't do a whole lot. I don't really try to do search algorithm optimization. I just kind of post stuff, and if people are interested in it, they read it, and it's usually long format because I'm not brevity is not my strong suit, but that's kind of where all those things land, and our training stuff that we do. We'll be at SIG Academy in May 4th and 5th for any law enforcement on the East Coast. We're doing our stress inoculation training and tactics up there at the SIG Academy. The SIG is providing all the handguns and all the ammo. So you just need to come with your, whatever you train or you work in duty gear wise. And if you don't have a SIG, that's fine. We'll get you kitted out with a holster that fits. And they're going to provide all the guns and ammo. It's going to be 2 days. A lot of force on force, simulations, combatives. It's basically Disneyland for any law enforcement officers that want to come up and get better. And there's no minimum requirement as far as like capability or time on the job. Obviously we lean a lot heavier towards patrol because we want as many patrols as we can. But honestly, if you're East Coast or you can make it up there, that's on our Instagram side of things too, and or just reach out in any way and with a DM or an email, and be happy to get you hooked up with that because that's the stuff we're doing now. It's a ton of fun, and it's going to be right in the middle of the bow challenge. So I'll figure it out. I might take my bow out to New Hampshire and see what I can do up at SIG with some archery stuff on the on the pistol targets.
Well, Jake, we are just about out of time here, and first and foremost, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us here on the podcast. And I want you to know personally that you may not see it, and you probably do see it here and there, but I want you to know that you are the type of person, and you personally have definitely inspired a lot of people to be a better person. And as you said, 1% better. And I know with your dedication, your passion, the stuff that you're involved in, you have saved lives out there of brothers and sisters just like you. Who may have found themselves in similar situations or find themselves in the worst moments of their lives. I know that deep down you have saved a lot of brothers and sisters from those deaths. With that being said, once again, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate the time that you've given and the experience that you've shared with us and your point of views on things. Is there anything in closing that you would like to say to the folks, even though it might be a small following? I hope it grows as it continues to grow, but anything you'd like to, close out with?
Oh, I just appreciate the opportunity and any chance I have to talk about, anything that somebody might find in any way, shape, or form useful, even if it's doing the opposite of what I did, just so that they don't have the same pain and heartache. I'm happy to share what little bit of knowledge I have about anything, but I'm also happy to learn. So if people that are listening to this want to get involved and they see a way that we can do things better, or want to jump in and be more involved on any of the fronts of the stuff we talked about, I'm always happy to, improve and grow a network. And I just think there's a lot of us out that are, like I said before, the 5% minority is making 95% of the noise. And it'd just be nice if some of us that are on the more normal side of things could just have a little bit more of a vocal output in a place that we feel safe to, have these conversations. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here to be able to do that with you today.
Well, like I said, I thank you. Thank you so much for that, but also thank you for taking the time to do that. Folks, that's been Jake Mahar. I hope you guys have had a great time spending the last couple hours with us. And as always, I hope you guys stay safe out there as you are chasing the experience that you want. Remember, it's your experience. Don't let someone else troll you out of that. It's yours, not theirs. And at the same time, don't troll another person into taking the experience that you want. Remember, it's yours. But until our paths cross again, or even just the next podcast, I hope you guys stay safe out there, and God bless you guys.